There is a man who survives the end of the world. He builds a massive boat. He fills it with his family and every kind of animal. The waters rise. Everything is destroyed. And when the flood finally recedes, a rainbow appears in the sky. You know this story, but here is what no one told you. This exact story was being told thousands of years before the Bible was written. In Babylon, in ancient India, in China, in Mexico, on every single continent on Earth. More than 200 cultures around the world share a flood story. 200. These are civilizations that had no contact with each other. They lived on different continents, spoke different languages, and worshipped different gods. And yet, they all tell the same story, a great flood that destroys humanity, one chosen family that survives, a boat, animals saved, a new beginning. The question is not whether the story exists across cultures. It clearly does. The question is why. How is that possible? There are 3 theories. Some scholars say it is coincidence and that floods are common everywhere, so flood stories arise naturally. Others say the story spread from one original source and traveled with human migration across the world. But the third theory is the one that keeps archaeologists up at night. That all of these stories are pointing to something that actually happened. A real catastrophe, so massive that every civilization on Earth still remembers it. Let's start in ancient Mesopotamia. The year is 1853. A young scholar named George Smith is working in the basement of the British Museum in London. He is cataloging thousands of clay tablets, recovered from the ruins of the ancient Assyrian library of Nineveh. And then he finds something that shakes the Western world. A 3,000-year-old clay tablet, written in cuneiform, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and in it, a flood story almost identical to Noah's, written centuries before Genesis. In the Gilgamesh version, the hero is called Utnapishtim. The gods decide to destroy humanity with a flood, but one god warns Utnapishtim in secret. He tells him, tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions. Save every living creature. The flood comes. It rains for 6 days and 7 nights. When the waters calm, the boat rests on a mountain. Utnapishtim sends out a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. The raven does not come back. The waters have receded. He offers a sacrifice. The gods are pleased. Sound familiar? But Gilgamesh is not alone. Go back even further to the Sumerian text known as the Atrahasis epic, written around 1700 BC. Different name. Same story. A flood sent by the gods. One righteous man warned. A boat, animals saved. A new world. And it is not just the Middle East. In ancient India, the sacred Hindu texts describe a man named Manu. He is warned by a fish, an avatar of the god Vishnu, that a great flood is coming. He builds a boat. The fish grows massive and pulls the boat to safety on a mountain in the north. Manu then becomes the ancestor of all humanity. In ancient Greece, Zeus decides to destroy corrupt humanity with a great flood. But the titan Prometheus warns his son, Deucalion. Deucalion and his wife build a great chest, float for 9 days and 9 nights, and land on a mountain. They survive. The world begins again. In the Americas, completely isolated from the old world, the Aztec tradition tells of a man and woman warned by a god. They hollow out a great cypress log. They float through the flood. They survive. The Native American Ojibwe people describe a hero who survives a great flood on a raft with the animals of the world. In China, the mythical hero Yu spends decades controlling a catastrophic flood that has covered the entire Earth. This pattern does not happen by accident. Something is being remembered here. The question is what? Now let's look at the Genesis account, the version most people in the Western world know. In Genesis chapter 6, God looks at humanity and sees only wickedness. Violence fills the earth, and God makes a decision. He will start over, but one man is different, Noah, described as righteous and blameless among his generation. God comes to Noah with a specific instruction: build an ark. The dimensions are precise: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits tall. That translates to approximately 450 feet long, the size of 1.5 football fields. Noah is told to bring his wife, his sons, their wives, and 2 of every kind of living creature. Then the flood comes. In Genesis, it rains for 40 days and 40 nights. But the waters continue to rise for 150 days. Everything outside the ark is destroyed. Every living thing on the surface of the earth. Then, slowly, the waters recede. Noah sends out a raven, then a dove. The dove returns with an olive branch, one of the most enduring symbols in human history. 7 days later, the dove goes out again and does not return. The land is dry. Noah builds an altar. He offers a sacrifice, and God makes a covenant, a promise that he will never again destroy all life with a flood. And as a sign of this covenant, he places a rainbow in the sky. Now here is where it gets fascinating. In 1929, the British archaeologist Leonard Woolley is excavating the ancient city of Ur, one of the oldest cities in the world, located in modern-day Iraq. And in the middle of his excavation, he finds something that stops him cold. An 8-foot layer of water-deposited silt. Pure clay, no artifacts, no pottery, no human remains, just sediment, the kind left behind by a massive flood. Above the layer, normal evidence of civilization. Below the layer, a different, older civilization entirely. Something had happened here. Something so catastrophic it erased everything and left 8 feet of clay in its place. Woolley immediately announced he had found evidence of the biblical flood. Other archaeologists were cautious. But the layer was real. The sediment was real, and it dated to approximately 3500 to 4000 BC. That is not the only physical evidence. The Sumerian king list, one of the oldest written documents in existence, actually divides history into 2 eras, the time before the flood and the time after. As if the flood was not mythology, it was a historical dividing line. So if so many cultures remember a great flood, and archaeologists have found physical evidence of one, what actually happened? Scientists have proposed several theories, and the evidence behind each one is extraordinary. The first is known as the Black Sea flood hypothesis. In 1997, 2 Columbia University geologists published a landmark study. Their research showed that around 5600 BC, something extraordinary happened in the region of modern-day Turkey and Bulgaria. At that time, the Black Sea was not a sea at all. It was a vast freshwater lake sitting below sea level. On its western edge stood a narrow land bridge, and on the other side of that land bridge, the rising Mediterranean Sea. As the last ice age ended, sea levels began to rise, slowly at first, and then the land bridge gave way. The Mediterranean burst through the Bosphorus, and water poured into the Black Sea basin at a rate 200 times greater than Niagara Falls. Every single day, the water level rose by 6 inches. Within months, entire landscapes were swallowed, valleys, forests, villages. People who had lived on those shores for generations watched their world disappear beneath the water, and they ran in every direction, carrying their story with them. Ryan and Pittman believe this single catastrophic event is the origin of all Middle Eastern flood myths. The survivors became the ancestors of the cultures that told the flood story for thousands of years after. But there is an even larger theory. From approximately 12,000 BC to 6,000 BC, the entire planet was coming out of an ice age. The massive glaciers that covered North America, Europe, and Asia began to melt. And as they melted, global sea levels rose by 400 feet. Over thousands of years, entire coastlines vanished. Low-lying regions, where most ancient civilizations lived, were slowly swallowed by rising water. Every culture on every coast experienced loss. Not from one flood, but from the slow, inevitable memory of a world that disappeared beneath the sea. And then there is a third theory, perhaps the most dramatic of all. The Younger Dryas impact. Hypothesis proposes that around 12,800 years ago, a comet or asteroid struck the Earth. The impact triggered massive wildfires across the northern hemisphere, sudden catastrophic climate change, and widespread flooding. It may have caused the extinction of the woolly mammoth and dozens of other large species in a matter of years. Evidence for this impact has been found across 4 continents. Elevated levels of iridium, nanodiamonds, and widespread burn layers, all dating to the exact same moment in time. One cosmic event, one catastrophe, burned into the collective memory of the entire human species, whether it was the Black Sea flood of 5600 BC, or the gradual drowning of coastlines at the end of the Ice Age, or a comet impact 12,000 years before written history. The evidence points in one direction. Something happened, something so devastating that 10,000 years later, people on opposite sides of the planet are still telling the same story. Here is what is undeniable. Across 200 cultures on every continent in every era of recorded history, humanity remembers a flood, a great destruction, a new beginning. In Mesopotamia, they called him Utnapishtim. In the Hindu tradition, Manu, but in Greece, Deucalion in the Aztec world, a man with a cypress log, and in the pages of Genesis, Noah. Different names, different gods, different languages, the same story. Now, does this prove that the biblical flood happened exactly as Genesis describes? Scholars continue to debate the relationship between the ancient texts, the archaeological layers, and the geological evidence is complex and still being studied. But consider this. The Epic of Gilgamesh was written before Genesis, and it contains almost every detail of Noah's story. That means one of two things is true. Either both stories descend from the same, even older oral tradition, or both stories are pointing to the same real event. And when the physical evidence, the sediment layers at the flooded coastlines of the Black Sea, the impact signatures on 4 continents, aligns with what 200 cultures have been saying for thousands of years, the case for a real historical catastrophe becomes very hard to dismiss. The rainbow that God places in the sky at the end of Noah's story is described as a covenant, a sign of remembrance, so that neither God nor humanity would forget what had happened. And if the evidence is to be believed, humanity never did forget, because 200 cultures on every continent in the world are still remembering it. If this many ancient cultures share a flood story, what other stories in the Bible might be hiding historical truths? Next, we investigate the city of Sodom, the city God destroyed with fire, and what archaeologists found at its actual location in 2019. Subscribe so you don't miss it.